Sometimes when we see something on our skin, our tendency is to want to pick it off or scratch it off. If we could just get through that layer, maybe we can get rid of the skin and get rid of that skin problem that is driving us crazy. But I would encourage those, especially those that have psoriasis, to avoid doing that, because what happens in our skin is when we start to pick it or when we start to scratch it, our skin says, oh, hey, she likes me scratching it, I'm gonna grow some more. And so sometimes that can actually induce lesions getting worse and getting thicker. Hi, this is Sarika Ramachandran. I'm a board certified dermatologist, and today we're gonna talk about skincare and psoriasis. The scale is coming from within. You're getting hyperproliferation. So things that we do on the outside don't really stop that process. What it does is just removing what we're seeing there, and that can actually irritate the skin and make problems worse. I don't recommend doing any kind of harsh exfoliating regimens. I don't recommend using brushes. All these things can potentially traumatize the skin in the areas that they're used, and we know that that can potentially be a trigger for worsening psoriasis. In psoriasis, a good moisturizing regimen can be helpful. There's no specific ingredient that you have to use. Sometimes there are things that you can use to descale lesions that are what we call keratolytics. And those can include things like urea that can be found in some of the over-the-counter products. Some people will find that things like salicylic acid may be helpful with psoriatic lesions. Everybody has different things that they like to use. There's no one thing that everybody has to use, but you have to find something that works with your skin and that feels good on your skin. One of the ingredients that can be helpful for moisturizing the skin and helping to create a protective barrier is petrolatum. You can find it in some products over the counter, and that can be helpful to address the irritation that's seen in some of our psoriatic lesions. It's important if you're using that on a psoriatic lesion that you're making sure that your medication, if you're using it around the same period of time, you'd want to use the medication first. Some of the medications that are in ointment form are actually very, very nice and hydrating, and so you may find some benefits to using that form in areas particularly that are drier. So we tend to find that ointments are the most hydrating, so petrolatum and things kind of related to that tend to be most hydrating. There are some benefits to using oils. Some people use the coconut oil as a moisturizer and find that to be hydrating for their skin. Different things and different vehicles actually are hydrating to different extents. And so, for example, creams, which tend to come in those nice tubs, those tend to be very hydrating, and lotions less so. But you notice that lotions kind of move a little more easily, but they're not quite as hydrating as the creams. Creams come in tubs usually, lotions come and have the little pumps at the top. There are other forms, things that are gels or things that are solutions. They tend to be more alcohol-based, and they can be a little more stingy when it comes to using them in open areas, so like cut areas, really irritated areas. Those can have a little more of a stingy sensation. They are nice to use in some places like the scalp, just because it's easier to get around the hairs and things like that, but they do have some drawbacks when it comes to using them in more open, irritated areas. You may want to kind of avoid things that have alcohol bases, especially like micro cuts, or you're finding that there's like open, irritated skin. And that's important kind of as a general principle. When you're looking at a psoriatic lesion, the ones that are super irritated, if you use generally irritating thing or even some of the descalers, they can really irritate that area of scabbiness. And so you just want to be pretty careful in terms of that. There are certain brands and other things where they try to kind of minimize additives, and that can be helpful. But be sure you're looking at the back when it comes to things like fragrance. Even things that say that they're all natural can have a lot of fragrances and other things associated with it. So just be a little bit careful when you're kind of navigating the very tricky world of moisturizers and even natural things. The principle of avoiding trauma to the skin is important when it comes to psoriatic products, or products that we feel comfortable using in psoriasis. Products with like little beads or like little kind of abrasive things, you want to be very careful that that doesn't take the skin and irritate it more, thereby triggering continuous flares. In addition to that, it's important to use sun protection. So there are several things that can be helpful to know when you're thinking about sun protection. And there's many ways that you can actually reduce your exposure to UV. When we're talking about sun protection in both psoriasis and outside of psoriasis, it's important that we're careful to minimize time outside, especially unprotected, between the hours of 9 and 4. This is the time when the sun is at its strongest and we feel the forces of the UV most powerfully. It's important to try to use sun protection in the form of sunscreen. There are sunscreens, and there are many out there, that can be helpful. When you're looking at a sunscreen, you want to make sure you're using an SPF of 30 or higher. You want to also make sure that it says broad spectrum. That tells you that you're getting protection both from UVA and UVB rays. With the sunscreens, there's many out there. There are creams, there are lotions, there's also sprays. Some of the sprays may feel a little kind of irritating depending on if there are like open areas. The sprays are good, but also important when you're using a spray for the sunscreen, that you want to make sure that you spray it on, but that you're rubbing it over the area that you're wishing to protect. So that's super important. You don't want to just like kind of spray and then use it like perfume. You want to actually use the spray and rub it in to make sure it's actually covering the area that you're trying to protect. In addition to that, if you're spending the day outside, say you're in the swimming pool or you're outside watching a game or some kind of athletic event, you're spending a lot of time out there. Know that you should be reapplying sunscreen every 2 hours. So you want to make sure that if there's a long period of time that you're outside, that you're reapplying. That's sometimes one of the places that we forget. We get busy, we get caught up doing the things that we're doing outside with the people we love. Sometimes we forget about the sun protection. So that's where it's important to kind of set little reminders, and you can use your cell phone for that too. But little reminders, beeps, you go and you renew your sun protection. There's sun protective hats. The wider the brim, the better it is because it's giving you extra protection around. And in addition to that, there's other pieces of clothing. There's long sleeved and other clothing that can be helpful that has an UPF, which is a protective factor for the clothing. So scalp psoriasis can be helped also with topical steroids if it's limited to the scalp or if they're responsive. There are multiple different types of topical formulations that can be helpful. Some of the anti-dandruff shampoos can be helpful. What sometimes we do is alternate the different kinds that are available and using the different mechanisms that they are using to help get rid of the scaling and the flaking can be helpful. Sometimes washing on a daily basis, if possible. We know we can't do that with all different hair types. So even if not every day, as often as is able to be washed so that the scalp is getting some of the medication on there as well. Dealing with a difficult skin condition is not easy, and having to worry about how it presents in the world can be a hard thing. Some people with psoriasis on the skin opt to wear makeup, and some people don't. You should do whatever makes you feel the most confident. If you opt to wear makeup, making sure that the skin is moisturized before applying the makeup can be helpful. Going out and having psoriasis lesions without makeup is totally okay to do. Psoriasis is a pretty relatively common condition that we see in our dermatologic practice. It's not a contagious condition, and we really want everybody to feel good and confident about themselves with whatever makes you feel most comfortable when it comes to your psoriasis skin lesions. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope this psoriasis skincare guide was helpful. For more information on skincare, subscribe to Healthline and like this video. Thanks so much.